right, good evening and welcome to the show tonight. My name is Anna Deshawn and I am the Vice President of the Board of Directors for Affinity Community Services. Affinity is a social justice organization serving the Black and Brown LGBTQ community in the Chicagoland area. We've been doing this for 21 years now and we're really proud of that. I'm excited tonight. I have a special guest, a good homie, Dr. S.
Yeah, hey.
Hey, Dr. S is joining us tonight, and tonight's topic is the new group that we're forming at Affinity called Spectrum. And Spectrum is a group specifically for folks who consider themselves to be masculine of center, people of color. And we chose the word spectrum because we are on this continuum, right? We're not just all one thing. So individuals who identify as lesbians, as studs, as butches, all these labels, right? Until all the way to genderqueer and trans men. Right, the Affinity's mission includes the T and the Q, and what we're doing is making a conscious effort to create support groups that actually include the T and the Q, because we all need community.
Yes, we do.
And this is one particular group that especially needs community. So I invite all of you all to join us in this conversation. The number is 312-738-1060. We're taking calls throughout the course of the show if you'd like to chime in. So Dr. S, welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today. I guess I should tell the folks a little bit about me.
Yes.
Just got my PhD in higher education from Loyola Chicago actually this past summer, and I work at University of Illinois at Chicago, the Gender and Sexuality Center. I'm one of the assistant directors there. And what I do there is focused on education and evaluation. So education is facilitating, coordinating our Safe Zone program, which is all about sort of getting in the room with people and helping them understand the ways that gender and sexuality have expanded, what that means for people's lives and some of the issues that they're faced with, but also how as an individual and as an institution you can be more affirming, more supportive of LGBTQ folks within organizations. And I'll also be teaching this spring at UIC, the Gender in Everyday Life. So I feel like my life is all about gender, sexuality, gender.
And more gender.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about tonight. And what we wanted to start off with is actually an exercise that we are very familiar with, but oftentimes our community is not. We oftentimes make assumptions about one's gender based upon how they choose to express themselves outwardly, whether it's their clothes, their hair, all types of assumptions that we make based that equal gender. So one of the things we thought would be nice is we actually asked each other our personal pronouns, right? Because it's not something that we do traditionally or naturally. So Dr. S, what is your personal pronoun?
Yeah, so I really don't like pronouns. I didn't tell Anna this before, but
Right.
I'm really like bucking against pronouns, but because they're such a big part of our lives, I ask people to use either they, them, theirs, or just S, Dr. S, Doc, all those good things are okay.
Right.
Yeah, and I sort of flipped it back, and, what are yours?
So my personal pronouns are just anything that's respectful. Really works for me. Me and my friends, we use all types of pronouns. Say, what's up, boys, what's up, man, thank you, and using she and he, she and her and hers, and it all works for me. And that's why it's another reason we wanted to use the word spectrum, because there is no one way for some folks. Everyone is not on just this binary where everything is black and white.
Yeah.
For some folks, things are somewhere in between. And creating space for that and creating space for those individuals is so important. And that's what we're doing at Affinity. Yeah. So Dr. S, I want to hear more about the work that you're doing and your research, right? So your research was compiled of you doing interviews with trans folks in higher education?
Yeah, so I interviewed 14 trans educators from California to Connecticut. I'm pretty excited that I was able to get such a wide spectrum of folks. Half of the participants identified as white, half of them identified as people of color. Actually had 2 folks who identified as black. And we just talked about, like, what does it mean to be trans in higher education? And one of the things that came up in our conversations was this idea of like a lack of community, right? So thinking about who makes it through higher education, and then who gets into these positions as faculty or staff in higher education, and the importance of having people that look like you, that understand your identity, that sort of can, I came across this idea of mirroring and witnessing. So people who like you also see you like them, right? And so it's like this affirmation that, you know, you're not this alien, or you matter, you exist. Other people share similar experiences. So I had a great time doing that study, and community was so important that I put them in community in the paper, even though they weren't in community for the project. So I interviewed them all separately, but in the write-up, I made them talk to one another, right, to see what it would look like if they were mirroring and witnessing each other as trans educators, and it was pretty cool.
It's really great. It's really great, and I think it's interesting that at the end of the day, it still all boils down to having community, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about trans with an asterisk, because the trans is not just one thing or one type of way of being, is that at some point they identified as another gender, right? So I have a lot of friends that I grew up with, and you know, we were all young little lesbian studs, is the word in Chicago often used, and at the end of the day, today, so many of them have transitioned and identify as trans, or identify as genderqueer, choose not to sit on any particular binary, who challenge the idea of what gender is and how gender should be seen. And so many of us met at Affinity when we were 21, 22, 23 years old. And traditionally, Affinity has served, you know, Black, lesbian, and bisexual women. And so when we talk about 2016 and who Affinity serves, the T and the Q are included in our mission. And the fact that so many trans folks lose community when they transition because of the barriers that we put in place in regards to identity and how we create community. So was a big part of needing community and space because they've lost some of that, maybe throughout the course of their experience?
That's a good question. I think for some folks, yes. I think, excuse me, there was a recent study done, the U.S. Transgender Study, and they actually did a study, I want to say in 2007, 2008, I can't remember, the first study, and it was about 4,700 trans people, and then this newest one, close to 28,000 trans people, right? And one of the things that they found, and that I found as well, is that some people do lose community in the form of family, friends, even at work, right? Not having people at work who see you the way that you see yourself, and so not wanting to spend time with those people at work. And so there were certainly people who talked about losing community. But I think this kind of community also supplements community that you already have, or serves as a different kind of community. So when you think about this idea of chosen family, right? So you might have a good relationship with your family, and that might continue throughout transition. But that family still may use the wrong pronouns, or may still not understand sort of who you are, who you're becoming. And so having an additional family, right, chosen family community, sort of affirms you, helps you to feel empowered, feel like you are someone who matters. And I think it supplements. So I think it replaces for some folks, but it supplements for others, and probably all kinds of spectrums in between, right? It's all about a spectrum.
It is, and we all live in it, right? And so even when we talk about some of the recent things that have really made the news, when we talk about something as simple as going to the restroom, going to the bathroom, and how territorial people are in regards to that, as if genderqueer and trans folks haven't been going to the bathroom for hundreds of years.
Right.
Just even having the conversation has turned into this very huge legal and emotional battle. And it really speaks to how much work we have to do in regards to gender and identity, and how we view that in this country and around the world going forward. I think we have a lot of work to do. And I think some of the work starts with us. So having a support group that you can go to really talk about your shared experiences really helps you to grow and become more comfortable into who you are and who you want to be, instead of trying to fit into what you see, because what you see can be very limited. We already know like the four corners of our neighborhood, but what about the neighborhoods that we don't see every day?
Yeah,
That's really important.
I wanted to sort of speak to that that bathroom thing, because I think similar to pronouns, people sort of minimize the bathroom experience, right? We all got to pee. Right, like that is just sort of a human thing that we need to do. And so to minimize the anxiety and the violence and the sort of distress that can come along with just needing to go to the bathroom, I think really needs to be highlighted. And at a space like Spectrum, right, thinking about folks can feel comfortable going to the bathroom in that space, right, because they're with people who understand who they are and aren't going to tell them they're in the wrong place. I often am very anxious going to the bathroom. We were at Macy's yesterday, and we had to go to the bathroom, and it's just like, which one do I go in? Are folks clocking me, right? And so I think that having that experience, it's very stressful. And if we can create spaces where that doesn't happen, create awareness and education around why that shouldn't happen, I think we can, keep moving forward, kind of like you said.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, we are welcoming your questions, so feel free to give us a call. We have Omari on the phone lines helping us out tonight. The number is 312-738-1060. So, Dr. S.
Yes.
So, I know you also have a program for first-year students, right, and a support group of first-year students at the university. Can you tell us a little bit about that and sort of their experiences and what that transition is like being a first-year student in a university?
Yeah, so, I mean, you can imagine, I remember being a first-year student, sort of taking, let's say you strip identity away, which is impossible, but just being a first-year college student is stressful, right? College is very different from high school. You might be in a different environment than where you grew up. But add to that the stigma that comes along with being LGBTQ and some of the experiences that students have in classrooms being LGBTQ, where there might even be faculty members that don't understand and are using biased language or violence towards students by not using the pronouns that the students have asked them. So we were trying to think, what could we do as a center to sort of support and affirm students as they're acclimating in that first year. And so we created a program called Queer Compass. I believe this is the 4th year of Queer Compass, and it's for first-year new students and first-year transfer students. And it's all about building community. So we meet every week for an hour and a half, and we talk about things from identity to relationships to the prison industrial complex to going on fun field trips to Columbia to see some works of art or going to Gallery 400 to see art. So it's really about, again, helping students to get acclimated, but also building in community, because again, sort of to our point around why Spectrum is so important, right? Community is extremely important, and it's so important to see people like you, to connect with people who have had similar experiences or can share some advice with you. So it's been really successful, and what we find is, they come individually the first couple of weeks, and then after a few weeks, like they're coming in pairs, they're coming in trios, they're hanging out outside of the group, they're really developing that community outside of the space that we've created, and so we think that that's important as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
So being a person who went to a PWI, a predominantly white institution in a very small town.
Where'd you go?
I went to Drake.
Oh.
So I lived in Des Moines, Iowa for 4 years. Did that.
I went to Iowa State. We didn't
I
know that.
I knew that about you. You didn't know that about me. Yeah, we spent lots of time in Iowa. And you always are looking for people that look like you. So I love this whole idea of mirror and witness.
Yeah.
And that's actually how I actually came upon Affinity. At one point I Googled, and I was extremely afraid of actually going to Affinity. And I followed Affinity for quite some time before I actually built up the guts to actually show up at a drop-in. At the time that was called XPU, and it was for young folks. And so when we talk about needing the opportunity to speak with people who know your experiences, who know what it feels like, in this particular case, to never, as simple, want to wear a dress, right? Just never feeling comfortable with bows in your hair, or always feeling more comfortable around guys, or just always feeling more comfortable being athletic. And, you know, some of these generalizations are just that. They don't apply across the board. But there's so many of us that do share these very same experiences. Wanting to dress like my dad, always putting on his shirts, happy that we have the same initials. And so when he gets his monograms on there, they mean like they can fit for me as well. And then also understanding what it means for your parents when they in my case, I feel like my parents really, my father in particular, began to feel a little guilty, as if he had some role in it, even though, you know, we did go to the Mr. Shop for Easter shopping, and not thinking anything of it, not relating it to sexuality or gender identity in any way. It was just me being Anna, and that's so much of the case with so many of us whose family members and friends grow up with us. They're just like, it's just Anna. It's nothing different about them. And it's absolutely true. And so I think that support groups and places like Spectrum, and there's places across the city of Chicago where you can find these types of spaces. And you know, one thing that's particular about this one is that we do want to focus on people of color, because oftentimes we show up at spaces and we are the only ones. And there is something particular when you talk about culture and neighborhood that is particular. And so we definitely want to create that space for us.
Yeah.
And it looks like we got a caller, which is exciting. Caller, what's your name and what's your question or comment?
Hi. So my name is Sylvia, and my question is this. I've been watching the news and kind of watching the climate of the country, and I feel as though the past 8 years we've really gone a long way, but towards learning to be more tolerant, understanding that not everyone is the same, and there are different types of ways people can do gender, so to speak. And I wanted to know if you have expectation that that sort of tolerance will continue over the next 4 to 8 years with this kind of new congressional administration.
Oh, Sylvia. That is a great question. Dr. S, you want to take this one first?
You know, I think that it's kind of a trick question. So do I think that things will continue in terms of Congress and Senate? I'm not sure. I think there might be some things being held up in those spaces, but I think, as has been the truth for hundreds of years, people on the ground are going to be doing that work and continuing to push policies, continuing to push people like me, right, continuing to educate others and talk about some of the issues and help folks understand, so that, you know, we get to a place where we're beyond tolerance and we're at a place of acceptance and affirmation, right? I think we still have a way to go. So I think yes and no, right? I think the work will continue to happen. I don't know about sort of at the congressional or sort of policy level, but I think on the ground the work will continue to happen. What do you think?
I mean, I completely agree. I think that, you know, President Obama actually made huge strides. And I think that his growth in regards to the LGBTQ community is actually really telling, I think, of how the country's feelings have grown, right? He came into office not agreeing, and leaving office not only agreeing with marriage equality, agreeing about so many things having to do with the LGBTQ community, and being very vocal and speaking about equality in the way that it includes LGBTQ folks, and we're not just talking about racism.
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that makes Affinity special is that we do deal with the intersections, and intersections are so important, right? So when we talk about, Dr. S and I were talking before coming on the air, and it's about the fact that, you know, we grew up as Black, we grew up as women, and then as you grow older, you grow into who you identify as far as gender and sexuality. And so bringing all of those things into a room can be very difficult in certain spaces. Everyone doesn't have to deal with that level of intersectionality, you know, on all of those levels. And so I think that we will continue to do the work as all marginalized people do. And I think that politically, we have a crazy climate. He's going to be putting in Supreme Court justices into place. There's all types of rights that are at stake when we talk about the political climate today. But but we talk about the people climate. I think that the people climate is you're gonna see a huge growth and a continued swell of people saying, I am not going along with what is happening politically in this country.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we can't mistake visibility for like acceptance or an indication of more tolerance. I think that just because there are more people that we're seeing on TV like Laverne Cox, like Janet Mock and others, right? We assume that means that people are more tolerant. Well, what's happening though behind closed doors, or what's happening for folks who aren't making it to that particular platform? So I think we have to really do the work in our communities, right, in our families.
And we have another caller, but one more comment I want to say about this is that we also have to look, when we talk about the Janet Mocks and the Laverne Coxes and all of these beautiful women who live in the binary, who you can't, like Dr. S was saying, clock. We have to fight for those that are being clocked every day. Black trans women are being killed at enormous rates, at devastating rates, and people are not being prosecuted. And those are the people that we are fighting for, and the reasons why we continue to do this education.
Yeah.
All right, we have another caller on the air. What's your name and what's your question or your comment?
Hi, this is Imani.
Imani.
Great job, everyone.
Hello, this is Imani, our Executive Director of Affinity Community Services.
Hello.
Well done. Dr. S, is so wonderful to meet you virtually. And great job, Anna. Well, my name's Imani. I use she, her, and hers, or they, them, and theirs, or any gender-neutral pronouns work great for me. And I just want to say that I'm really proud of the work that we're doing at Affinity, and I'm thrilled to see that our programming is continuing to be more inclusive. So I couldn't be more excited to see Spectrum in 2017. And I also wanted to sort of ask, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to ask, when you think about Spectrum, who is it open to? It's so important that that we're working in solidarity with each other, and by that I mean, cisgender and gender conforming folks, making sure that we're working in solidarity with each other, but then also making sure that we're keeping spaces safe. And by that I mean centering the voices and experiences of trans, gender nonconforming, genderqueer folks. And I'm wondering, how do you plan to keep the space safe so that we are centering those experiences? Because, the last question that folks asked was really important, but this is especially important thinking about this new administration to really make sure that we're keeping our spaces safe, because they're more important than ever. And I was just thinking, I wanted you to talk more about what that means, like how the group is open to individuals.
Sure, absolutely. I think this one is on me. So I think how we do this is continue to articulate about who is welcome and what those expectations are. And as we begin to open up the group, we open up the group asking about personal pronouns. We open up the group asking about how people identify and making sure that everyone is aware of the rules of what it means to be in this particular safe space. We also want to make sure that it is particularly, we are targeting people of color, our black and brown, brothers and sisters if you identify in that way, because so many other spaces just don't particularly outline it there for you. But at the same time, there is never a point where I know I have lots of folks who are cisgendered, lots of folks who identify as white, who are so awesome, who can add so much to the space that they are absolutely welcome as well. I think that the whole point here, though, is that we support each other where we're at, and welcoming people where they are so that we can grow together. So a piece of this is, yes, we all need support, but a piece of this is also we're going to be educating each other about how and why we identify the way that we do, and how we all are still community. Along this spectrum. So when we talk about lesbian women who identify as so many things, lesbian, butch, masculine of center, to people who identify as genderqueer, I choose not to use any of these terms at all, to queer, to people who identify as trans men, all masculine of center, and who all, I believe, have more in common than they think. And so I think that's how we do it. I think it's a work in progress too. When we have people like Dr. S and Jace and G and JT, all who have sort of become a part of this core team who've talked about Spectrum and wanted it to be a real thing, we'll make sure that everyone feels welcome, no matter how and where you identify in that spectrum.
Siblings, can I say that? So
Yes.
you said brothers and sisters.
Yes.
That's another way,
Thank
right?
you.
Using language like siblings or more
Thank
gender
you.
neutral. Yeah.
Yeah, and so inclusive language is so important, and even as we plan and think, those are those moments where we catch ourselves because
Yeah.
it's so ingrained into who we are and how we speak.
Yeah.
So thanks, Imani, for calling in.
Yeah.
And so always, please come visit us at Affinity. We're at 2850 South Wabash. Our website is affinity95.org, and you can visit us and learn more about us. We're all over social media, Facebook, Twitter. I think we even have an Instagram. So check us out. We'll be learning more about Spectrum here soon, and our next big event is our Burning Bowl that's happening early January. So please come out. It's an amazing way to start off the new year. So thank you so much, Dr. S, for
Thank
coming on.
you for having me. And yeah.
And we'll be back
here.
Yeah, we'll be back in 2017 with more great shows and more great topics. Take care.
Thank you.